Hello and welcome to our special solar eclipse update. We tonight are going to share some things with you. For those of you who are new to this audience or new to this group, we're going to give just a brief abridged version of our background so you kind of have an idea of where we came from, and then we're going to update all of you on what is really going on behind the scenes in the financial system and how we became part of that mission. And then we're going to talk about how we can optimize the eclipse window that's happening tomorrow. This is a huge portal and it's a very exciting time. And so we wanted to do this special update just to kind of rally everybody's energy around visioning the world that we want to create. So we're excited for the big leap. We're going to go through, and you're going to hear from everybody here. You see new faces. We'll talk about that in just a second. But let us start with the great invocation. From the point of light within the mind of God, let light stream forth into the minds of men. May light descend on earth. From the point of love within the heart of God, let love stream forth into the hearts of men. May Christ return to earth. From the center which the will of God is known, let purpose guide the little wills of men, the purpose which the masters know and serve. From the center which we call the race of men, let the plan of love and light work out, and may it seal the door where evil dwells. Let light and love and power restore the plan on earth.
I'm very humbled with awe and wonder by the divine orchestration that has brought us all together, especially in this paramount time, a truly auspicious time of great transformation. I've written many pages about the future of massive change over the last 30 years, especially around alignments and gateways, as many as you know. We've already seen the expansion of consciousness exploding across social media in the last few years. My own messages started over 45 years ago when my inner ear was receiving the guidance of the Ascended Masters. They said the ascension of the planet was happening in my lifetime and that I would play an important role in it. I talked about this as a tsunami of consciousness sweeping across the planet, which just grew larger and stronger to finally tip the scale. Armed with this idea, I tried to speed up the time this would happen, and Saint Germain told me, while I am a master soul, I can manifest anything I want, speeding up this time was not possible. We needed the opening of the various seals that represent a mass shift and awakening of consciousness first. This was foretold to me as the opening of the seventh seal, the crown chakra, integrating our higher selves. It was 10 years ago when on Easter, the sixth seal, or third eye, opened on a blood moon. This was a very moving time and was an omen related to prophetic dialogue of biblical proportions. Now we're about to witness the sun, S-U-N, on the cross in America that depicts the ascension of the whole heart. As a whole, humanity is being initiated, and it started 7 years ago with the other solar eclipse crossing. I knew I was on a mission from God to broadcast a frequency for transmission since my teens, such as my activation tools. I had numerous miracle-like experiences with inner and outer guidance that encouraged me to take up this narrow path. I was told by channeling from Mother Mary that I would write a great book that would imprint the consciousness grid with important wisdom for humanity, hence the seventh seal. If that encouragement didn't happen, I would never have thought to write down a thing, because all my school teachers said I was a bad writer. My cosmic scientist friend, time traveler friend that I met when I was 25 always gave me special encouragement by revealing profound insights and essentially confirmations of information that I was getting the right insight and guidance. And he confirmed that I was this reincarnation of Imhotep. I innately knew much to be true, and when I had the confidence to share this with him, he said he was waiting for me to tell him that. Then he opened up and told me many more revelations. Without these and other insights, I would not have had the courage to endure such lifelong sacrifice, near-death experience, and other trials and tribulations over decades. Many don't know much about my walk to this point and how it's really been rather difficult, and I needed the support of friends and you all to keep going, frankly. This is indeed the time of the apocalypse, which means the unveiling or revealing of full truth. It is happening in a variety of ways, and in essence, I've been preparing for this moment my entire life. Now we are opening up more of the whole story to you. So let's go deeper.
So, yeah. Well, you've noticed, thank you for sharing that. That was really beautiful. Um, there's a new face here. This new face is not new to our team. She's just been behind the scenes for a really long time helping us. Please meet Anna Bronstein.
Hi.
Okay, so, a lot of people might have a misconception of how many people are on the ground here and working on these things from where we are. We have an extensive team that is global, so there are people all over the world that are participating with us, but the crew here in Sedona is kind of a skeleton crew. So each of us wear many hats, and Anna is no exception to that rule. She wears many, many hats on our team. So Anna, do you want to just give us like a brief background of like your professional history and how and what you do with us here in Sedona?
Sure. I've been a computer programmer, software developer, website designer and developer for over 40 years. Just did all sorts of IT technical things my entire life, and I've been doing spiritual type of things for over 20 years.
Very powerful healer.
Yeah,
very powerful.
Energy healing, among many other things. And so I came here several years ago after watching the Deep Disclosure series that all of these amazing people did 6 years ago. And I got here and I just asked if I could help out doing office work, computer work, website work, administrative stuff, accounting, whatever is needed. So the rest is history.
Yeah, she handles all of those things for us. So she's like our one support staff person that's here at the moment. We've had other people come and help, but Anna has been here now for almost 5 years, right?
Yeah.
And so she's stuck with us through all of the ups and downs and the crazy twists and turns of this journey. And she's being a little humble about her background in programming. Anna, how many languages do you program in?
I did not count. I probably did 10 languages in my first year back in the 80s, and everything from the mainframe and up through all the ranks. So.
And how old were you when you did wrote your first program?
My first professional program that I got paid for, I was about 12.
Yeah. And how did you transition from the tech world into the spiritual world? And what was that like?
It didn't seem like a transition. It was just I've always been interested in energy healing and psychic healing and all that stuff. I had not encountered a legitimate person who was doing that until early 2000s when I went to a workshop and I had a pretty clear otherworldly experience, and I just jumped in both feet, took every workshop in front of me, started spending a lot of time with many incredible, powerful healers, and I amassed probably about 8 or 9 healing modalities over the following 5 or 6 years. And so it just, these were not polar opposites. It was just something, I am an evidence-based person, and this was evidence. I felt things, and to me that was enough evidence. I didn't need to do more research or find more proof.
Yeah,
so.
I love that, because there's a lot of people I think that are I come from the Silicon Valley, so like there's a lot of people that don't necessarily take the leap. It's like, or they see kind of the woo-woo spiritual, and they don't see that there's a huge parallel between science and spirituality, and you know, going on your journey doesn't mean that you're any less of a, you know, intelligent person. I mean, you're one of the smartest people I've ever met. And just so everybody knows, Anna's she's family, and she is just full of integrity, full of love, and she's just one of the best people I've ever met on this planet, and we're so blessed to have her. And she's been behind the scenes for so long. You guys hear us kind of say Anna all the time, but we kind of wanted you guys to see who was here and get a better picture for what was going on here. So thank you so much for sharing that, Anna. We're going to move on to a little bit of Mark's background now. So Mark, why don't you share? Everybody knows Mark by now, hopefully. But not everybody knows exactly where Mark came from or what he does with us. So why don't you give us a little bit of insight into that, Mark?
Okay, well, absolutely. Thank you, Megan. Well, so my background has always been primarily, you know, for the sake of this work in the financial side. So quite a history that took me to this point. We were reminiscing about some interesting times in the past. When I remember when I first had a hit, I think when I was in high school, there's some agency people that showed up, and I didn't know anything about that, but I had this impression or intuition that these people were kind of interested in me, and that was really my first encounter. And then that would take me down a path that was very bizarre and interesting at that time going forward. So I would say after that point, I was left alone to kind of progress on my own through college, where I was an athlete, and that I was just mostly focusing on athletics, and so starting to be kind of a leader in certain areas, setting myself because of leadership positions that I had in the past. And that took me into, you know, I was always a financial guy, trading and doing things like that. So I guess I got noticed also that I had a knack for trading and generating money, and the knack for business deals.
Yeah.
So I guess after that point, I kind of had this shadow from intelligence agencies. I didn't understand, but my phone, as I came out of college, my phone started to, you know, go off the hook, and that people were interested more in giving me a job on Wall Street, and then that launched my career. And I went down a path to get all my licensing and all my financial backgrounds, accreditations, my Series 7 and a bunch of other securities licenses. I worked for a couple of the firms on the street. Morgan Stanley, I was the head of an institutional desk. So it was I was kind of felt like at that point that I was being given opportunities. It was a very weird, strange hand. It was exposing me to so many different areas. I never liked being in the corporate finance world. I always preferred to do private things. I was always more an individual. I was
kind of started going out on your own a little bit towards your end of that career, right?
Yeah, I left Morgan Stanley and I started my own hedge fund. So private asset management. I was on top of the world at that point. Things were all...
How old were you then?
I was 29 when I left Wall Street, and I moved back to Florida.
Yeah.
And I was just running my own asset management firm, boutique, and trading, and life was good. And that's when life got strange too.
Can you get
what happened when 2008 hit?
Yeah, not to get too personal if you don't mind sharing, but how big was the hedge fund you created?
It was small. I mean, it was just personal money that I had acquired and a couple of partners. 25 million was my total asset under management. I had some, well, that's small on Wall Street, but yeah, and just as quickly as it came, 2007 happened, and
2008.
Well, I think it was 2007 or the crash.
Yeah. And
it felt like an invisible hand was steering me in a direction, almost like a sabotage, and guiding me from an analysis standpoint, from the technicals that were telling us to do certain things that I had the analyst on Wall Street, and that I think it was almost like a setup, because the next thing I knew, the market came out with the Bear Stearns collapse, and then I lost all my money.
It was overnight, right?
Everything collapsed. I went through a complete turmoil part of my life.
Yeah, what did that feel like?
It was devastating. It was Probably the most devastating day of my life.
Isn't it great how spirit just kind of relieves you of all your earthly possessions when they're sending you on your mission?
Yes, that's exactly what it was. And you can't understand it at the time. You just feel like the world won't go on because everything that you know, all your success felt like it was pulled out from underneath you.
Yeah. I mean, you're very humble about it, but if I was 29 years old and I had gotten that much abundance under my management, I would be pretty shocked to see it all go.
It started a very dark path in my life where I was searching for answers, and also the time when all of a sudden weird things really started to come in that I'd first seen a glimpse of. So I would say at that point, it was like almost like an invisible hand was redirecting me or trying to humble me, or I didn't know. I was very confused, but I went back at it. At the time, dug in harder than I ever, and for about 7-8 years, I was learning things that no one else was learning. I was being exposed to the biggest transactions, but no one in the intelligence side wanted to let me break through in a big way. I would do very large transactions, and I would try to, take my fees, and it was like someone was blocking the funds. I could not.
At what point in that did you receive the call from basically the White House to?
It was a couple years later, which leads me into where I met Matthew. Matthews is probably around, I think we were saying it was around 2009.
Mm-hmm.
This is where, I'd been realizing that I had found out that a couple of the people that I was working with, I thought they were just business personnel, and I found out they were agency people. And the next thing that I knew, I was asked to be a trustee on a trust, and it's kind of the New World Order trust, we should say, and that's where I ran into Matthews for the first time. He was just another name on the corporate documents at first, and there was I think there was 14 different trustees, all in different categories that had different expertise, and the rest is kind of history down that. That's when I started to wake up. There was a bigger hand.
Yeah.
That was guiding.
Yeah, we can talk a little bit more about that when we get into what it is that we actually figured out we were doing together.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll give you guys just a little abridged version of my background. There's plenty of versions of this out on the internet if you want to listen to the whole thing, because it's a really long story. But essentially 12 years ago or 10 years ago, I was a hairdresser working in the Bay Area. And I worked on tech executives, and I was an educator for a product line, and I was killing it. So this all came as a big shock to me. So 12 years ago, my father passed away, and I was introduced at the time to a medium, and it was really my first experience with the divine. I had believed in magic my whole life, but I had never had a real validating experience with it. It was just kind of this mystery that I was chasing, and this kind of leaky, this little drip coming down before it kind of just turned on all the way. And so the process of losing my father and meeting this medium and it activating parts of myself that I did not know I had, it changed the whole trajectory of my life. So when I met him, he told me I could do what he could do. I did not believe him. I wished that would be awesome, but he said, no, this is what you're going to do in the future, and when it happens to you, you're going to think you're crazy, but I want you to reach out to me because I'm going to help you. And so about a year later, exactly what he said happened. Everything turned on full blast. I was causing power surges. I was feeling all these emotions. I could hear everybody. I could hear all the crystals. I mean, it was just wild. It's just this magical world just collided with mine in a way that I couldn't go back to normal. And so around that time, after the experience of meditating and leaving my body for the first time, I was visited by some beings from the inner earth, and they took me with them inside the city of Telos, and they explained to me that I was about to go on the most epic journey of my life, that I was going to quit my job, leave behind all of my friends and family, which for me was a very big deal because I'm one of 9 children. I'm also grew up as a twin, so going out, striking it out on my own was huge shift for me. They also informed me that during this process I would lose all of my money, that I would be homeless, that I would be seen as crazy by everybody that knew me, and that when I tried to explain to them why I was doing what I was doing, it would just make it worse, and that I was going to do all of this because I was going to help save the world. So at the time, I thought they were absolutely insane. I didn't understand how they thought I could help save the world in any way. I was just a hairdresser. And so it was just mind-boggling. But it just got weirder and weirder. And they put me through a process of remembering my past lives, which I don't share publicly, but there were 3 of them. And while I was doing my research, I found a book with 3 of my previous personalities depicted on the cover. And that was written by this gentleman sitting right next to me. And so I reached out to him, and basically he had been waiting to hear from me. And it was time for us to join forces, and that's when I quit my life and I joined up with this wild bunch, and I haven't looked back since. So it's been a crazy 10 years. I didn't know it was going to be 10 years when I started. I didn't really know much when I started. It was just this very compelling mystery, and I've always been a curious cat, and so I just had to follow. I had to follow the breadcrumbs. I had to see where it went. And on top of that, I knew that there was something that wasn't right about this world and the way things were going. And even though I didn't believe the people that were telling me that I could do something about it, I knew that I had to at least try. And so I did. And here I am. So,
Well, thank you for showing up 10 years ago, because I was putting the clarion call out even then. Where is everybody that's supposed to be helping with this?
yeah. So that journey now, so Matthias and I, we were the first ones to pair up. He came out after I found him online, he came out to meet me. And then we left on our journey, and for a couple of years, Spirit would just tell us, go, get in the car, go here. Get in the car, go here today. So we'd wake up and we would just go. And every time we went, we would meet the person they intended for us to meet. And eventually they sent us down to Florida, where they said we would be getting involved deeper in the financial system. And that is where I met Mark.
Well, and the deeper is because 20 years ago I was involved in building a new financial system. I was recruited, and there was, agencies involved and all these things. And I've told this story, obviously, like Megan, throughout the Deep Disclosure series and other times, but it's just really amazing, though, that was too far ahead of its time even then. And while we had so many things ready to launch in 2012, it all got shut down. The cabal reared its ugly head and trumped up charges against everybody above me, which is like 4 people in that group, and they all went away for like 10 years. And so, yeah, it has been a very arduous journey to follow the spiritual path, frankly. This is going to happen and that's going to happen. And back then I was working on those things for free, by the way. Nobody was writing out, like you'd like to say, checks for the revolution. We were just carrying the torch because it was burning bright in our own heart.
Yeah, our compensation over these last decades, combined, has been just morsels of truth that we found along the way that validated that we were going in the right direction and just kind of kept us going. And so, there were always these little things that were popping up, and I mean, that brings me to a little bit of story about how we kind of really connected. Because when I showed up in Florida, I was a California girl, and I was born with a heavy dose of confidence. And these men didn't exactly know how to take me or why I was involved in some financial thing at all. And so, but I slowly won them over, and it started by giving accurate information. And so the very first night that I did a reading for you, we were in the living room of one of your homes, because you used to have many before we were relieved of all of our possessions. This man, without knowing me or Matthew, took us in and hosted us for 6 months in his home. And on one night, I showed him what I could do. And it turned into a very strange reading because, well, I'm at the time I was really only kind of keyed into the fact that I was a medium. I didn't know my like interdimensional communication skills. And so I'm talking to your grandmother and your like great aunt, and they're showing me their cookies and talking about your childhood. And all of a sudden, I look over to the other side of the room, and there's a man standing there. And now, for those of you, like when I see people, it's usually like in my mind's eye. I'm not seeing them like in the room, but this was like a full apparition. Now, I was the only one that could see him, but I could see him. And he spoke his name to me. And I described him to Mark, and I said, he was tall, very thin, kind of gaunt. He had thick, black, wavy hair and a mustache, and he was wearing a suit that looked like early 1900s. It was like a wool, thick, kind of baggy suit. And he spoke his name to me, and it was Nikola. So I asked Mark, did you have a grandfather named Nikola? And he says, Nikola Tesla? And I look at him again, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is Tesla. I'm looking at Tesla. So he proceeds to tell us a story. And this is where things get really bizarre, right? I mean, as if it wasn't bizarre already going into this, but it got extra weird here because now there was a new element introduced into what we were all doing together that we didn't really quite understand before that. And so he proceeded to tell me that he had created a time machine. And he had worked with Mark's great-grandfather. They were neighbors. Mark's great-grandfather was a scientist, and he joined Tesla in his lab. And it was around the time that Tesla had perfected time travel. And I saw them travel. And I saw them travel with Mark's grandfather. And so Mark's grandfather grew up and ended up being in the military and taking a very serious role there, and we'll go into a little bit more of that. But that is how we realized that what we were all doing together, it's how we began to realize that we're all doing together, and what's going on the greater scale also involves a time war that's been going on for 19 million years. And so that was like quite the revelation. I had no knowledge of your background or your family background. So what was that?
Oh, absolutely. And I was going to say, Meg, that was the moment where like something switched on in me, and it's like I saw things from a different perspective because I was confused. And I know that, there was an invisible hand pushing me down a path. I didn't know exactly where it was going. I'd seen my own vision, so I'd always followed. I was always a little bit of a dreamer, and that I always saw glimpses of what I would be doing, but I didn't know, like, there's too many unglued parts. And that when I first met you, you were so strong in your personality, and like I didn't know how it rubbed me. I was thinking like, am I crazy? Is she crazy? Or I just, there was so much going, that she had so much information. I didn't have a place to put it at the time. But when she went deep into me and you did that reading that time, you not only pulled out, you saw you described my grandfather, and I don't know how anyone would know, you actually said his name, and you actually got his name. And that's when like I just went, like spirit hit me like a ton of bricks, and it connected so many things that were a mystery on my family lineage, or from my grandfather and my great-grandfather, and that it would send me down a path to figure out the history where exactly my great-grandfather, he was partners with Nikola Tesla and Marconi, and he actually introduced them. And then my grandfather actually was at the lab, as a boy when he came from Italy, and that he was then in the middle of that project where his life would go in that direction. And he would actually eventually be the architect and go on to what was the Area 51 library, was Tonopah, Nevada. And he would eventually be the architect for the whole back end global collateral accounts, where all these things that were starting to awaken in us. When Megan hit on these things, it was like, who is this oracle? Like, how do you know these things? Like, I was in awe. And that was also when you told me you had seen something dark in my future, and you asked me, would you like me to share? And I said, please, I'm tough. Tell me whatever you see. And you said, are you sure? And I said, yes. And you said, when you flip over in your Range Rover, just be calm. And it's going to flip 3 times, and you're going to have a little small cut on your head, a little blood, but you're going to get out of the car and walk away. And I said, when this happens? I'm like, first of all, how does a Range Rover flip? And you said, well, it's going to happen. And I didn't want to tell you, but you asked. So I thought, like, that was the craziest thing in the world. And little did I know, 1 year later, almost to the day, because it was the same season the following year, I'm heavy now into doing our work, and we're being sabotaged. And I was called into the court. It was a very bizarre situation. I was being targeted. And I had this very weird, strange exchange with the judge, and the judge tried to lock me up in the courtroom, literally, when I wasn't even being rude to him. And as I left, I realized something's not right. As I pulled out of the parking lot and was driving in Palm Beach, as I was going through the intersection, someone was waiting, pulled out, put the cars in full drive, and swiped the back of my fender. And literally the car is flipping over. And the first thing I thought is, oh my God, Megan was right. Relax. You're gonna be okay. The car flips 3 times, lands on its side. I'm like completely stunned. I check myself. I have blood coming off the corner of my eye, glass all over me. And I'm like, I'm okay. I'm in shock. I'm okay. And trying to be the tough guy that I usually was, like, I wanted to make sure I could get out of the car. So I pushed the glass aside and got out. And I'll never forget that. I was like, I will never second guess whatever Megan says ever again. It was surreal.
Yeah.
So
that's crazy. It was crazy. I remember like telling you about it, and I also knew that you were like leaving I knew you were leaving a meeting, and that because I saw you dressed in like, you know, business attire, which if anybody like hangs out around here, Mark is like a beach bum. He loves the sun, so he will only put a suit on if it's necessary.
Going to the bank, and this time I was going to the courtroom because they were trying to like play some games with me at that time, because we became opposition to this, let's say this deep state, or the old banking old guard.
Yeah.
Because they knew we'd play a specific role in that.
So isn't it true this grandpa and general person were first on the scene at Roswell? What happened then?
Well, that's interesting, right? So these things that were now, like, say, deep intelligence, right? And we've heard some of the stories. I later started to put the pieces together that Grandpa was doing this stuff at the 51 base, and that's where the back-end assets would be housed that were what we call the heritage funds. And I had then figured out that a lot of the people in my life were a part of, like, agency, CIA agency, that somehow were, you know, working for another head who turns out, well, I'd be later introduced, or I was actually introduced right around this time, and he was running this operation of the whole financial system in the back, and the guys that had been around me for the last 8 years were quietly working with him and grooming us for the future. So it all started to connect at that point, and that's when, you know, I'd learned, you know, from my grandfather's full work, and then the people that he was working with, because he had passed away, and that's another story. And the next person that would come in was someone that was really close with him, and then would take me under his wing. And that was the general, that was the head.
And he was at Roswell after the crash? First person there?
Yeah, let's just say that general, he's no longer with us. He actually got us prepared for this time, but he had the highest security clearance, off-world clearance. This is where it's like super compartmentalized, you know, Area 51 stuff. But, you know, he was, you know, traveling, you know, intergalactically. He traveled to the Galactic Federation. He had told me he'd been in 51 different unique places off of Earth, planets, different systems. It's hard to swallow at first. And he then also started to talk about something that literally is the reflection of what we would do, which is a project called Project Looking Glass. If we've ever dived into that, that's a topic in itself. But Project Looking Glass was something that they had seen the members here and others doing our work in the future. So they had a glimpse of the future, and it was on a crystalline pad, kind of like an iPad, but it was, as I was explained to me, it was a crystal pad, and they used to call it the tube. So, and the first time I had heard from Grandpa, which is the general, this is the general that took me under his wing. He was starting to reflect on things we do in the future, and then I said, well, how do you know what we do in the future? And he said, let's just say we saw it on the tube, which was the looking glass, right? And they had seen us, and that's why we'd started to get tapped early on.
Well, which is a segue for when I was 25, so 35 years ago in the late 80s, I was walking down the street and I got waved into a house by two people, and I saw some crystals on the shelf behind them. I felt, I was comfortable because when I was 21, I was getting to know crystals. I'm like, oh, they must be cool. And I went in and they're telling me about trillions of dollars, trading platforms, some kind of military operation. There was a guy in charge, and they gave me his initials, which turned out to be the same initials as the individual Mark was speaking about. And they were like, there's going to be all this money for projects. And I'm like, what are you telling me this for? You're going to be involved and you need to know. Be prepared.
Yeah, there have been so many instances like that throughout our lives that are just so strange. But when we get, like, as you go on, it kind of all clicks and starts to make sense. And so, they were tracking us through this looking glass. Kind of reminds me of, like, that room on The Flash where he goes and sees the future with the little tap. So I think that's a disclosure. So, they had been watching us since before we were born. Like, they were tracking us. They had started tracking our families, and the way that it kind of collided with me was, my mother was, she was singled out and groomed by a man named Anton Sander LaVey, who was the head of the Satanic Church back in the 1960s. So my mother was 14 years old, and for 5 years, he was grooming her. And she grew up in the projects of Oakland, and he would come pick her up in his limo and take her to those crazy parties, like the Marina Ivanovich parties. And so my mom had mentioned this to me when I was young, and I thought it was just like this one kind of crazy brief encounter. I didn't find out until much later that it had gone on for 5 years. So they basically were trying to insert themselves into my family to gain control of the powers that I would later develop. And so I thought when I first met these gentlemen and when I was working with them, that, like, I was a kind of a backup character, that nobody was really interested in me or, like, knew where I came from or what I fit in, and what I just assumed that they thought I was one of their girlfriends and kind of just left me out of it. But in 2016 is when, through these two, I had an opportunity to work for a private intelligence agency called the GIA. And during that, when they were giving me, a security detail and clearance, they were doing a background check on me, and the head of that agency came to me and said, like, I was very shocked by what I found. Like, I thought I was going to find some maybe like fudge taxes or some parking tickets, but you have as much surveillance on you as somebody that is working directly with the president in the White House. And this started in 2011. Now, I didn't meet these gentlemen until 2014, so this was a very big shock for me. And I started to kind of like put together the pieces where I didn't realize, like, I had been visited in about 2010 by a CIA recruiter, and she was a client of mine, I thought. And after developing a relationship with her, she asked me, "Do you know what I do, Megan?" And I was like, "No, I thought you were retired." And she's like, "I'm a recruiter for the CIA." So I never, I didn't go to work for the CIA at that time. But I just, I was living my life. I didn't understand. This is all like science fiction to me. So it didn't really seem relevant to me at the time. And it wasn't until later, but in 2011, when I started causing the power surges, and I worked in a salon with like 30 stylists in downtown Campbell, in this big Victorian. And one day I blew out about 20 dryers in the place. The washer and dryer, I was blowing out the lights. Every place I walked in on that little city block corner, the power would go out. Things would be flying off the shelves, and I'm like, what is going on? I'm like, this is the most insane thing I've ever experienced. And so apparently I had like kind of set off some radar by, this strange activity, and I found out much later that they actually keep tabs on people like me, and that my relationship with these agencies and the military had begun a lot longer ago. I just had no memory of it. So, which is still, I think, unsettling. And I think any of you that have been a part of any secret government program kind of knows the feeling. And I don't think it's anything else. Like, I don't think anybody else can really understand it, but just a large chunk of your life missing is a very strange experience. So yeah, we had all of these kind of strange interactions or strange interventions, and all of these different agencies that.
Well, yeah, and another example, right? Before I was asked to be a part of this new financial system development, a few years before that, and not long after I got off of this mothership, I got picked up. I've told you that story in some videos recently. I was involved in another trust dealing with a unique individual that had many, many assets, and he had died, and I was asked to be like an executor to help wrap up things with his financial trust. And I was at a meeting, and I was introduced to a man across the table. There was two sides of the table, my side, myself, and four guys on the other side. And they go, by the way, this guy's a CIA bank inspector, and he's just here to observe things. And after that meeting, he approached me in the parking lot and said, here's your get out of jail free card. I'm going to be your friend. And I'm like, oh, do I need that? And he's like, we're gonna be friends. And he was friends with me till not that long ago, so 20 years. And there's a lot that can be said about that, but that's even before I started to work for that financial system. So, the interest of these stories are profound. In fact, one thing that comes to mind briefly is the people I was working for doing that. There was a time when they were like, where are you right now? I'm like, I'm in California. Why? Well, there's a person impersonating you going in and out of banks in another country trying to cut these or access these accounts and do these certain things, and we're going to fix your passport, so that you won't have any problems. And then they contacted me a few days later. He's been apprehended, and they revealed to me much later, they were like, they didn't know why there was this, I was a underling at that time in this operation, and they didn't know how come, what's the great interest, or why would somebody want to pretend
You
to
were
be?
impersonated 9 times.
Yeah, total, but they didn't understand, they didn't have the inside information that told them what we now know.
Yeah.
I would also say at the time, like, we were really confused. Like, I know I was confused, and all I knew was where my heart wanted to go as far as my the vision for my future. As I started to see some of these things, I got really concerned. So I was like, some of this stuff was very dark. I detested being a part of a used or any type of operation. So I ran from this stuff, right? And then I realized that I became very oppositional towards a lot of the interest of some of these very hardline, agency people, which this was like a part of, I guess, like almost their New World Order or something. And that put me into like almost hiding for a long time, that I wanted no part of it. And then I started to realize right from the general that he had groomed us to be like the white hats, like to basically create a new path out of this, this system that has always been the same. And that was a very unique road to walk, because we had a lot of sabotage, right? So, and that's what Matthias was saying, is that it was a very dark time, because certain people had the most power in the world of banking, the banking families, the heads of agencies, they weren't happy about what the things we were saying on the phone about how we wanted to free the world of the tyranny, or we were disclosing events like 9/11 that we would found out so many things, and we wanted to be so far away from that. And all we wanted to do was projects, and we wanted to make sure everybody shared equally, like with full equity in the world system. And we knew at that point that this is not something that we wanted to be a part of. So we had to like chart our own course, and that's when we were like all alone. And that's honestly started like a 10-year, very, very lonely, and we only had each other, right? Because we're the only ones that thought like this, who shared this vision. And as we connected to each other, we saw like, wow, how divine, how synchronistic, that we are to each other, balancing points, anchors for each other's pillars, to be able to play these roles for each other where there was no one else. And anyone else that was trying to circle us from intelligence, they were trying to manipulate us. They were trying to use us for whatever their agenda was, and it didn't feel good.
That has to be like the most unsettling part of all of this. So like, because for me, like I mentioned, like I had huge chunks of my lifetime missing, and I had no idea what my real history was or what I was really capable of, and why there were so many people watching me. But when I realized the work that I had done, I had been taken up the first time when I was 4 years old, and at that time I was taken by friendlies, and they were preparing me. They had taken my sister and I to see which one of us would be the one with the gift, and how things would go moving forward. And then later I was identified at the age of 8 by some of the government programs that look for kids like me. And then I was again recruited at the age of 18 when I was in college. And so none of this, I had no memory of any of this. It was like that movie American Ultra, where he just gets activated and it's like, what? And so I had no idea about any of it. And I was very blessed that a woman came into my life, I don't even know how many years ago now, that had very deep knowledge of these programs. She showed me some of the original documents just to prove to me that it was a real thing, and explain that this had happened to me, and that she was going to help me kind of connect myself and disentangle myself from these people, because I just, it's just so unsettling that you have, I'm a person that always has answers, and if I don't have them, I can get them from upstairs. And so when there are things that are left blank and things that you don't know, it feels very disempowering. And so those little things, there have been a number of revelations. I've had a number of my memories come back over the years to kind of fill in the blanks. And I don't know that I'll ever know everything that happened, but that's been part of it. Part of the challenge of this process is just kind of being in the dark and having this entire world full of people that know everything about you, including who you've been throughout all your lifetimes, and they're trying to puppeteer your life and for their own agenda, and you're just kind of following the breadcrumbs, not knowing that that's what's going on. And so
speaking of filling in the blanks, that's a good segue to how the things that Mark was doing, the things that I were doing, were with the same people behind the scenes, because as we continued to add things up, the guy that was interjecting himself into my life, that was guiding me and, hey, check, if you're going to do a financial thing, check it out with me and I'll look into it. I'll find out if it's, good people, this kind of stuff. Later, many years later, I found out he was a shadow head behind the director of the Alphabet Soup Group.
Yep.
And that was an individual that was working with that general.
Yeah. And so just to disclose a little bit, right? So in the person that had been in Methuselah's life and that had shown himself to me, and Methuselah helped me connect the dots. And then when I would go through my network to find out what this person was, the shadow head for the agency, and he had known the advanced knowledge of what would take us to this time and what eventually we would be called to ask to do. And that comes down our background. I mean, our the training and the lineage. of what was there as far as the settlements. But he then put himself in a very precarious situation to kind of help us when we had major opposition. We were sometimes too loud, and we were learning things, and we were making mistakes, probably, but they were, but we were upsetting the heart of, like, let's just say the big names that everybody knows. And I don't want to mention any of these names, but we're talking about ex-presidents, we're talking about cabinet members, we're talking about heads of banking families, the usual suspects. We were really agitating them, and this is when they try to, like, set us up. I mean, I can go into stories. They try to frame us and things. They wanted to get us in a very awkward situation so that we would have to do as they wanted us to do.
Well, yeah, and one story that comes to mind, speaking of the protection factor, Megan and I had a Cherokee passport problem here in Arizona, and basically when we went to court for the first time, there was these guys with guns in front of us, and they were basically asking where my room was, and I was shitting my pants, and then they were sitting behind us. Megan could hear them saying my name, and I ran out of the courtroom after being indicted for fraudulent charges of a fake passport that wasn't fake. I called up this guy and I'm like, oh my God, they are there with guns. And he said, relax, that's your security detail. You won't see him unless there's a problem.
Yeah. At the time, we were being targeted by Homeland Security, and so we got caught up in this legal issue, and it was just a nightmare. We had been issued passports from the Cherokee Nation, as well as other forms of identification, and the Homeland took issue with that. And there were 13 presidents of countries that were carrying this passport. We had friends that had traveled in and out of the country on the passport, and we had no reason to believe that these were not legitimate forms of identification. And so we were shocked by this whole thing. It all started with a parking violation that ended with them throwing us in the pokey, and it was not fun. And so yeah, there were all these little things that happened along the way that alerted us to the fact that not everybody were fans of ours.
Well, that was a hot topic too, because these were the Cherokee passport. If you understand sovereign treaty law, the Cherokee lay claim literally from the Wampum Belt Treaty and a bunch of the treaties that go back that said the Indians were free and sovereign on the land. So we had full immunity passports, sovereign passports. And at the time, the Cherokees, and we were a part, and we had positions as ministers early on, they were pushing their rights, and the people in the government or the agencies were trying to suppress the Indians and the indigenous, and that we stood at the front of that. So it's like we set ourselves up to be even more of a target and using whatever shields. So that was like a super hot topic, and it was something that we were supposed to come across, because in the future what we would do too is to do all the sovereignty on this land, the Americas, and it's another topic. But
yeah, and it's just like challenging, right? Because there a lot of the times the intelligence or the military were expecting us to conduct ourselves in a certain manner, and we were not trained in the art of espionage. We are a stockbroker and a hairdresser and a couple of programmers, just a ragtag group of people that had the crazy notion that we could make things better around here. So we didn't know, we weren't skilled in that, and also when you look at it, they have their hands in so much. There's really no privacy on this planet at all. They can just I found that out from when they did the background check, and there was a huge file on me, including videos. And I was like, I've never filmed a video. And they're like, well, they could just film you right through your wall. They don't even need that. And there's been more disclosure on that now, but the technologies that are on this planet that are being withheld from the people are not 10 to 50 years ahead, they're 1,000 years ahead. And so there's a lot of stuff that they have that put us at a great disadvantage. And the only thing that we really had was, I don't know, a lot of chutzpah.
No, not just that. We had your guidance from upstairs. We had my own guidance system. All the information, insight, and encouragement for decades, before this all happened, where it was foretold, it was foreseen, it was, something that I was the crazy one looking for everybody that I was supposed to do this with decades before I met you guys.
Yeah.
And it never even occurred to me till I ran into you guys when I got the first confirmation that your life purposes fit into what I thought was just like a unilateral thing. I wasn't even seeing it as, so dimensional. I was living more, just kind of in a movie at the time, and I didn't see the spiritual. And then it hit me like a brick that there's these visions, and spirit came in, and then I could start connecting dots. That I was just like, wow, it was like epiphany after epiphany, and we were going through these activations, downloads. And it was just like so intense, and it was just like it kept the fuel for us to go forward, the guidance, the spirit, the revelations, to just keep moving forward, because we could see the end of the book. And so as long as I could see the end of the story, a lot of the middle was not so clear, and I was going through and learning and connecting dots step by step. Yep.
Absolutely. So basically, through all these crazy experiences and just following the trail, we concluded that we were here to create a new financial system to help liberate humanity. And it's one of the facets of what we've been kind of tapped to do. But it's a huge part that gets us from point A to point B. And because there's been such a lack of distribution of wealth on this planet, there hasn't been money to implement the things that would greatly improve the lives of everyone. The banks have become so corrupt that it's just impossible to move money. I just saw a video yesterday of a poor woman who Wells Fargo lost $44,000 of her money, and said that she was a victim of spoofing but refused to make it right. And she's not the only one. So there's a lot of this stuff going on. You guys know that. You've experienced it. So it only made sense that we needed to do this. And there's a reason why. Like, it wasn't just that they saw us. It's kind of like one of those self-fulfilling prophecies where they saw the outcome and then they started creating it and pushing us into it.
Down that path, yeah.
But there's another reason for it. And this kind of comes strictly by like fate and chance. It's like a divine orchestration. So like personally, I have like gypsy lineage. I'm part of the haplogroup X on every little trajectory which they migrated on this continent and others. And so I have DNA from almost every inhabited continent on this planet. And it turns out that the financial system on this planet is a DNA blockchain. It's a human blockchain. And so when you're carrying some of these original DNA strands, the system is coded to your DNA and you have the ability to unlock it. That is why we were targeted by all of the not so nice people, because if they could infiltrate us and get us to work with them, then they would have access to the funds, and they did that. They did that with other people. So it wasn't meant to just be the four of us. We're just the ones that are still here. And then, yes, there are other people around that are still here, but there are a number of people that did not make it because they got infiltrated, they got compromised, and they
stuck in the matrix. They can't get out of the 3D.
Or used to move money for the bad guys. And so
appealed by their greed or their fear or something that would keep them.
Or ego.
Yeah. So their motivation for gaining control over us was because of this DNA. And for me, it's just by chance. I didn't come from a royal family. I grew up in a trailer park. I'm a Mexican American. My grandparents were migrant farm workers. So like, I'm not this like privileged like royal individual that like would even be considered a part of any of this stuff. It's just by divine design that all of my ancestors carried these lineages, and they rejoined here in America. It's a result of the melting pot. And so anyways, because of this and because of our soul lineage, which we've been able to remember, this was what made us candidates for this work. But then we had to do the work ourselves, and we had to go through a number of spiritual initiations. And this is like the old mystery schools in the 3D. So it's a different kind of initiation than many of us went through in past lives. It's not the secret societies or like the going into the sarcophagus. It's about how do you react, how do you survive when it looks like you've lost everything and that you're, face planting at life, and how do you stay in faith?
Kingdom principles, faith, trust, love, and these were when you learn the truth of how these things work, right? Because that's all we had. We were running on faith, and we knew our hearts were in the right direction. We always knew we were here to do something or bless, and that was what was so important to us, is to be able to be the change and to see people happy and to see people, not suffering. And there's where the love factor would bring, so it's like these things I learned in another, like how, like really like Bible scriptures and things that are coming in from like how they all connect, and which leads us also to our work with the temple and, so many things that, because it really is a combination of all things spiritual, that the creation keys of our manifestations, that we are, all of us, every person on this planet shares these things. And maybe some aren't aware or awakened to it, but we don't think we're any different than anyone other, just a little bit weirder, a little braver to explore these things, a little eclectic, that our personalities would be such that we're like, almost imaginative in ways. I'm very dreamy. And because I was always in that world, that I was able to connect between two worlds, right? And I think we all share a little bit of that made us a little more unique, to think like this is possible, or we saw glimpses of this.
Yeah.
So speaking of what's happening, how did these things come to be that your lineage or your involvement with this master trust that we hint at occurred?
Well, I found out a couple things about my lineage, and it was like so concealed. Like, we're very simple people, but as I started to look at like everything from, old readings of things that were there were confirmations that were coming through, visions inside me, I was able to figure out like my bloodline, and then looking at confirmations that I descended from Rome, right, on one side with my lineage, and then to, the apostle lineages on, which all met in Rome, and that would make us a little more unique from those experiences on the DNA. So with DNA, and we learned this, and that we're trying to teach a lot of these concepts. But everything that's on your bloodline or your family lineage is stored in your DNA. So when you actually bring in enough light, or if you're doing your work meditating, in your meditations, or subjecting yourself to joy and losing the fear, things open up and you start to recalibrate your codons, and they open up just like a computer. So you'll start having visions of like what your great grandfather did, or even going back 500 years on your lineage. And you think these are dreams, or you think these are visions, but like they are literal truth of who you are on your blockchain. And as we went down this path and had these confirmations, we learned how to do it more often. And then, these things would just keep showing up. So I could remember things that were back, like when I first went to Rome, and I'm walking through, the Acropolis, or I'm walking through the Forum, you have deja vu, like flashbacks. And the first time I walked by the Spanish fountain, and the Spanish steps, and the Trevi fountain, I literally had a flashback to being a baby in a basket, and then know that was my great grandfather, and that there was a storyline in his lineage back to the Vatican, and that because he was a threat to the church, that they were prosecuting them. And then there's the lineage that goes back, and that we started to uncover these things. And I want to tell everybody in the audience, this is in all of us. Like, you would be so amazed if you go and do this work, who you were related to, what things you can conjure up. And that's what the teaching is. And this is what Methuselah has been showing everybody in the ascension process with the Seven Seal Temple. And I think it's fair to say we're all, very unique, and we all come from the same father, mother, God concept. We all have infinite bloodline back to millions of years.
Right, and fast forwarding to how you got into this position and this financial authority.
I don't know, I think we kind of found our way in and claimed our inheritance, right? Because everybody has an inheritance, and that it opened up to us, and then our will and our desire and our vision to follow that path and our faith. But I would say, more or less, there was some work on my family's lineage, and they did some things, but we were able to connect to it spiritually. So it's a lot of it's spiritual, uplifting, and doing the work. And I would urge everybody to do that, because that was like the most powerful, empowering thing that you could go through, even through all the adversity. It was like it made it worth it.
I want to touch a little bit on like what we've actually done in the kind of 3D paradigm so far, and that'll segue us into our update on what's going on now. So because this is such a huge undertaking, we had to kind of like divide and conquer, and so we've all taken on different roles within that. And so Mark's role has been to travel around the entire world and kind of aggregate the global assets and make relationships with all of the holders to prepare them for eventually kind of the redemption process of bringing those assets back into the system and creating actual real asset-backed money and moving away from the fiscal system that we've all found out is doomed to fail. So so that's basically what you did, correct?
Yeah, would you like me to explain a little bit?
Yeah, he does it better.
Yeah, I think that it's good to know that everybody's very confused about the financial system. So I call it like baking cookies. If you're going to bring new money into the system, right, this is how money's always been created, through the Fed, the Treasury. There's 5 monetary bodies, and they all share in the administration process. But behind the scene, there's like a special office of the currency control, and that pulls together the treaties and all the family bloodlines. So the United States system is just a combination of a bunch of royal families and the old banking families, and in Rome and in London and in the United States military and their intelligence getting together and saying, well, let's do the best of everything and let's make one monetary currency for the world. So there's certain controls that each of the families, one family would have the gold, one family would be kept in possession or control of the credits that were being generated from the gold investment to the Fed and the Treasury. And then you have cash palettes that are created for the future. That money can then float. And so there's all these derivatives, we call them. So there's 4 major things. And this special office combines them. So it's like if you were baking cookies, you need the chocolate chip, the flours, the sugar, and then you could mix them in a pot, and then you could bake them. So this special office has the only oven, let's just say, or technology that would merge upon a settlement, everybody's agreement. So it's like everybody, this is all a treaty. So everybody has to agree, all the families, the keepers, the holders, and then the monetaries have to say this makes sense, and then the government in the United States and in London and the royal families that are the trustees, which were like the Windsors, and all these families basically would have to say yes. But here's the problem, right? The guys that were maintaining, the asset managers, the bankers, started to create their own powerful sect, and that they wanted to take all these parts from the families, and they wanted to basically control with an iron hand. So that you had, because they were handling all these matters, they started to direct the resources to them for New World Order, and so there's inherently this pull or this struggle between trying to keep the treaties fair and serve the highest purpose. And it was never really, I'm going to be honest, it was never really for the people, which is said in itself. It was always about the elite people, and then the elite people in a power struggle. And it was always an afterthought, the people. And this is crazy. This is our world. This is where all the children, and they're all inheritance of earth. The meek will inherit the earth. But this system has always been unfair. And so as we started to learn, we wanted to, explore how do we create a new system that is, in service to all. And that's the Gaia Global Treasury concepts that we proposed to the families and the councils to try to unite everybody in their discord. You see the world's crazy right now, wars, and they're fighting over this. This is what it is, the wars in Israel. It's all over this. And that the differences in opinion. But we've always sought to try to unify and find a new way forward, because you need everybody to agree. And that's how you create global settlement, and that's how you do the redemption of the debt, which is the prosperity funds. That's when the project money, the good stuff. So I'm happy to say we got all the agreements done, and we have all the money, physically in the banks, and we're still dealing with the last oppositionary forces of the 5 monetaries and these certain banking families trying to figure out how they can manipulate, which we still have a hold on, and they cannot take but how they could steer the money in the path that they want instead of us trying to steer it in the path of all. So this is like a 4-month process. We put in a lot of trillions of dollars, fully what I call the best money that's ever been created. This is cookies. This is fully gold-backed USN, which is the new gold-backed digital currency, and that this is the treaty's money, and every person on earth is the beneficiaries of it, and that this was supposed to pay off all the debts. And some of these guys, I don't think they want the debts to be paid. They like the fact that they're indebted, and that keeps them in power. So we're trying to push to clear the debt, which are the sins. These are sins right now. That's being sins. And they're trying to block us from clearing the sins and starting a fresh new system. Fully equity, for the people, by the people, and that there's the last adversary, you know. But the good news is the inflection of this solar eclipse is looking like a refraction point.
Took the words right out of my mouth, because I was going to say, now we can kind of get into how the eclipse is going to affect this outcome. But before we do that, Matthias, is there anything that you want to add about your contributions or anything that you thought, or I think that was pretty thorough.
No, not coming to mind.
Okay. Well, you know, Matthias has been in charge of the kind of technical side of it and the technical apparatus for the receiving. And so that's kind of how the workload is kind of split between the two of them.
We'll call that the quantum financial system, right? Or how all these parts connect for the future and the new system, right? And Matthias has been, his background and his vision has been to always do that work. And my job is more like an ambassador or like a face to go in there and try to get everybody to agree. So I go between the royal families, I go between the power mongers, I try to find a balancing point.
Well, let's talk about the quantum financial system for just a minute. Is there really one?
There's a few, and as you know, obviously Matthias knows, but we've been working with all the different factions of the quantum financial system, and some are corrupted, some are the same old guys pulling in their own direction, and we cannot move forward just yet until we find the balancing point between where everything is safe, uncorruptible, and everything is, you know, run from programs instead of people's decision to serve themselves. So it's an autonomous system where the rules are created and the rules are right and just and fair, and the system would follow those rules rather than some human being, you know, in his own corrupt, self-serving way trying to steer all the billions and trillions to him.
And they're targeting launching in April?
Yeah, well, the first parts
That's this month.
the first parts of it are actually happening, and that's like, you know, some of the old institutions, the BlackRocks, the Vanguards are doing their version, but it's like this is going to take a little more time for the full. The version we're looking for obviously is ongoing, but this is a step forward, and it makes it 80% less corrupt. There's still corruption because it's the same old guys that are programming the computers, but you know, it's a step in the right direction. What I'd love to see right now is just getting resources to the white hat, good people in the world that will then create, you know, further development in the area of the just. So.
And we've been trying to bring together the White Hat group. I mean, you know, when I was doing the new financial system, they were calling us the White Hats at that time. And like when I talked to David Wilcock 10 years ago and I was explaining all this to him, and I'm like, we need to get all the right people together and we should be working together to get the right information out there. It wasn't, I don't know, landing with him, or he wasn't wanting to jump in with both feet. But it's been kind of a battle of making sure that all the pieces come together in the most harmonious way.
Yeah, we call it like a divine chorus, right? So everybody has their own skill set. We all together, all collectively have our own. And when we come together, we kind of make 4 different balancing points. We call them the pillars, but it's like the divine complements. But now we have to go bring 144,000, you know, divine complements together. And that's how we see it.
And part of the challenge of this, and what part of the role that I've played here, is that this is all it's vibrational, it's energetic, and so you're not able, so the key, it's not physical, it's not number codes, it's an energetic key, and you have to hit the right frequency, you have to hit the right vibration in order to unlock this abundance. And so my job is to help kind of polish everyone and help them work through anything that's holding back abundance, or not just for the people here, but everybody that's connected to us, and make sure that we're hitting those things. as well as doing the actual like real world physical stuff that's not that exciting, like all the graphic work and the cleaning and the cooking and the supporting and like, you know, we all, like I said, we all wear many hats. And so, but we've had to, and the work, and it's not just polishing others, like it's about like refining ourselves too. I have gone through, you know, all of these initiations, this crazy spiritual journey in order to be qualified to participate in this. And I've been so blessed to have women kind of come along in my journey and teach me wisdoms that were more my you know style than the wonderful and amazing things that Matthew taught me. And so it's been like it's been crazy. It's been this multifaceted thing that doesn't just require, like, it's not just coming up with the money to do these things. It's not just meeting the right people. It's about like becoming the version of yourself that's capable of doing these things.
And something interesting that just I would like to share before we go into the solar eclipse is we like could never do this without each other. But I share a special appreciation for you, Megan, and I tell you, but I don't think everybody understands the dynamic of the chaos that it's thrown at us in a day. And you know, Megan will know that sometimes I might get 250 phone calls, and they're all different parts, and we don't know where to start, and it's all hitting us. And Matthew is the same. All his life work is coming, everything's hitting us at the same time. But we sit down every couple of days, and we have what we call a tune-in. And this is where Megan can tap into the divine and get the quiet, peaceful guidance voice. And it always keeps us on the path. So she's steering us, and we love you for that. And without her, we would just be like constantly fighting the 3D, you know, almost chaos on our own. And that she can tell us, okay, there's 5 things coming down the pipe. And she'll get a clear guidance. Drop all those, do this one thing. We do this one thing, boom, we advance into the next stage. And like without her, like I would just be confused. It's just it's an overload, right? It's hard to be in spirit. And she gets that spirit, like, you know, in a way all the time whenever she looks to it. And thank you, Megan. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
That's so kind of you to say, and I appreciate it. And I do feel appreciated by my team. And this has become my family since I had to leave my family behind. And I just want to point out one other thing with Anna, because she's.
Well, my mind went there too. Like, how did you find us? What were you going to say?
Yeah, well, before we get into her talking about that, but just to point out, like Anna. So when we come up with crazy ideas of things that we want to do, Anna makes them work. So she uses her genius to figure out, how do I make this, how does this work? And she creates it. So she brings our visions into the physical. And yeah, so she's a fixer of sorts. She crosses all the different kind of facets of what we do and figures out how to make things work, as well as just being this anchoring energy that's just like holding it down and you know, kind of keeping the vortex that we're creating in a good flow. So,
if anyone's ever seen our website, the marvelous job that you've done on the website, and she handles all the fulfillment of all the 7 Seal
We have a
merchandise.
couple dozen websites.
Yeah, and just all the websites that I'm saying that.
yeah.
Very beautiful, yeah.
So how did you get here?
That's what I want to know.
How'd you find us?
Well, I listened to the Deep Disclosure. A good friend of mine sent me the very first Deep Disclosure, and 6 years ago, and I resonated with all of it. These guys, it was Matthew and Megan, and they were interviewed by a person here in Sedona, and they went into so many. There was technology, there was cryptocurrency, there were UFOs, there were politics, there was spirituality, they went into so many different rabbit holes, and every one of them I've always been into, just all of them. And Matthew's talked about Egypt, and I traveled to Egypt, 15 years ago or something, and had really felt big deja vu's there. Like I had been there 10,000 years ago. It felt so familiar. And so I subscribed to their channel because I'm like, I need to know when the next episode drops because I need to listen to it that day. And so after a couple of episodes, they mentioned that they kind of put in this like open invitation, you know, come join us. We're in Sedona, you know, come help us. We're bootstrapping everything, you know, we're not on anybody's payroll. We're brave souls who agreed to go first, and you can too. So, you know, nobody's recruited, nobody's whatever, you know, nobody's placed here, nobody's recruited. We just decided to fix this broken world. And
grassroots movement. Yeah.
Grassroots, bare bones, you know, not funded, and you don't need to have special licenses or qualifications or permissions. Just if you agree that the system is corrupt, we're here to change it. And I've my entire life, since I was a toddler, I knew that the system was corrupt and never believed in none of the institutions that are around. I've never had much faith in any of them. And so I found Matthew's email and emailed him and just said basically all that stuff that, you know, I'm into tech, I'm into crypto, I'm into Egypt, I'm in like all the things that you're talking about. I'm into spirituality and healing, and so if you can use my skills, let me know, and I want to help you guys. And so we talked on the phone a couple of times. We exchanged emails. He didn't like rush into, you know, giving me his website passwords because he didn't know me. Like, I
Thought you were a squeaky wheel, and so
I was a
like,
stranger.
okay, let's go.
Yeah, I was a stranger on the phone. I wasn't expecting him to hand off the back office keys, but and I was living in Southern California at the time, and I had gone through my own crises and all sorts of journeys, and was actually just rebuilding myself, but Matheus just said, you know, like, well, if you're in Sedona, you know, let us know, come to our shows, whatever, let's keep in touch. And so after every episode, I would text him and just say, hey, enjoyed the episode, it was great. And then I found myself in Sedona. I found myself in Arizona, a couple of hours away from here, and I texted him and just said, I'm in Arizona now. What events do you have coming up? There weren't any, but a short while later I was traveling through Sedona and texted him and just said, I'm here, you know, can we meet? And it just it took off.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful that he's so friendly and social, because you've just been an absolute gem, and I don't think that we could have done any of this without you in the end. And so I'm a little bit more of a hermit, and I don't know that you would have found your way into our hearts and home if Matthew wasn't like, so he just gets a hit for it. Like, I need to meet this person, and so I'm so grateful that you joined us, because it's just brought so much more joy and like kind of flow to everything, and kind of taking away some of the chaos, because it's so many moving parts, and it's like, you know, you got all these strong personalities, and you know, and you know, it's not a small undertaking, you know, it's a big deal. And so I'm so grateful that you're with us, and like, you know, it's been an arduous journey, not just for us, but for everybody that has supported us. And, you know, 10 years ago, I was asked to give up everything. I gave up everything, my autonomy, my privacy, my comfort, my success, my family, everybody that knew me for the first 30 years of my life. I had to walk away from all of that, and some of it you can't get back, you know. And I'm trying not to get emotional here, but you know, I lost my mother in the process, never saw her again. It's a lot, you know, but I don't believe that we've ever asked anybody to do anything, or Spirit hasn't asked anybody to do anything that we haven't been willing to do tenfold. And so I think that what was really important about having this kind of update was we're going into this eclipse, and we're less than 24 hours away, and we want to come to that with the best energy possible, because it's such a big deal that and the energy that you come in with determines how you exit that portal. And I don't want anybody that's been on this journey with us to feel like they've been struggling alone, that we have not been struggling alongside them. This has not been a glamorous endeavor. It has been really challenging. We have lost a lot. Matthias and I spent 18 months living in a parking lot. And before that, we were squatting in foreclosed homes. And, Mark has been to how many countries?
60 something, I won't know, and then that's all. It's not fun. It's a lot of it time. I'm basically, sometimes in the past, I was almost staying in hostels or the lowest budget places, or sometimes sleeping in the train station, or sometimes sleeping in the airport, or just barely going with enough budget. I mean, so it's like everything has been a challenge. It's like, how are we going to get this done with this budget? Or, so we've just shoestring budget, I guess, through this whole process. But hey, that's part of the mission, and that's what built our character too. So I celebrate that, and I love the journey, and it wasn't easy at any part of the stretch, but looking back, I think it's a better story, it's a more rewarding, and it developed us in a better way.
Yeah.
Well,
So
that echoes some of my life too, because, I almost died in the hospital 20 some years ago, and I was couch surfing after that because they didn't have insurance, and I couldn't work because I was paralyzed. But always in the 11th hour, there was always some kind of, divine assistance that enabled us to get to the next phase. So talking about that eclipse, it is really divine in the sense that it's so synchronistically orchestrated. Think about this for a minute. So if Jesus was crucified, and in the moment that he was up there on the cross, the sun blackened, do you think that was God going, oh my God, I'm so pissed off, I'm going to turn the sun off? No, it was a synchronized moment that eclipse that we're experiencing tomorrow was then. And so the entire divine cosmic clock and everything related to this super calendar of cycles has all been perfectly synchronized for all of these activations, all of these awakenings, all of these level ups for humanity. And this is another one that is culminating in the biggest way. We feel that it's such a trigger for the new earth and the alternate reality that we've all envisioned, that we just want everybody to embrace it in the same way. Because many times in the past, we were like, what is holding this back from getting done? Like, we had opportunities to have things done, and they just, whether they were blocked or fell apart, the guy was on his way, got in an accident, somebody had a heart attack, all these situations largely were nothing to do with the fact that it's a divine synchronized moment for this to happen, for the completion for everyone.
yep.
Yeah.
What is above is below. So it's like everything that's going on in the cosmos is playing out here. So it's like that's when you learn to surrender, because the universe is all intelligent, all knowing, and that's the God, the spiritual side, that you realize even in your worst moment, not most worst moments, nothing's wrong, and what you're going through is for your best growth. And so we always have to remind ourselves, and on the other side, we always see the sign of that it was that, always. That something is always hard in the moment, but it's so invaluable, rewarding, and earth-shattering as far as the revelation of going through that. And that's really why I think, we can see, is because we put ourselves in so many of these situations and just believed our way through it.
Yeah, I think one of the one of the biggest challenges during this is having been, previously viewed as a successful person, and then when people see you doing the things that we're doing or taking the path that we're doing, it's not viewed as respectable.
It's crazy, you're what, they lost their mind, those crazies, you know,
I mean-
until they understand. But
Even if they still love you, I mean, you can sense the pity. You can sense it. But yeah, it's like, so with the eclipse. Now I'm going to go into some of the things that I've been told by upstairs about what this is. So 7 years ago, when the first eclipse happened, I was told by upstairs that began a 7-year period of, you know, trials and tribulations for the rest of humanity, not the starseeds that had already done the first 7 years. And so, and that at the end of this would be the end of the human experiment, and that this would kind of like close that chapter, and then it would be determined like what we would do next. Now, about a year after that, when asking again, when is this going to happen? Like, when is this job going to be done? And they said to look for the big blue whale. Now, at the time, I didn't know what that meant. That's often what happens. You know, you get these like prophecies or these riddles almost, because it's like can't violate the free will. We have to solve the mysteries on our own. So they said, look for the big blue whale. And so I didn't know what that was until this eclipse came, and it happens to be passing through, you know, the 7 Ninevehs and Jonah and the rapture, and it also aligns with a constellation in the sky called Cetus, which is also called the whale, which is the big blue whale in the sky. And so there was also a biblical prophecy of something Jesus said. You know, I can't quote it exactly because I'm just all over the place right now. But basically,
no one will get a sign other than Jonah.
Yeah.
And that sign would be this sign, but no one knew when he was.
Yeah, and an adulterous and sin, like
exactly in that
generation.
That adulterous and generation longs for a sign, but there'll be no sign given except for the sign of Jonah. And how fitting is it that we had been talking about this, trying to unsolve this one, you know, a year ago, and then it just shows up, right? It's like Cetus, this, that. It's just like it just dawns on us. Yeah. We're at the gate. We're at the sign. The end of the age. It's really the end of the age. It's the age from Pisces into Aquarius.
Yes.
And we're moving in it, and it's gonna be a rocky, because people aren't ready to understand this, so they're gonna have to go through their tribulations to activate. And you know, this is the most interesting time to be alive.
Yes, and so it appears that this is the beginning of the new world. I think that there's a number of things that we just don't understand because this has never been done before. There, I think, will be multiple waves arriving into the new Earth paradigm, so it's not all at once. And I don't know exactly how this will look, because there's been a lot of question of like, are these people just going to be gone? Are we going to see people? But I have a theory, and it's been confirmed by some other like kind of quantum understandings, in that basically we exist in every dimension. So like we exist everywhere all at once, because everything's happening at the same time, and the only time is now. And so I believe what will happen is that those of us that have successfully gained the vibration to anchor into the 5th dimension will just be met with versions of people that were already there, and that the ones that have not decided to join at the first wave or the second wave they will just not experience the 3D version of them. So the version of that person that you experience will be the 5th dimensional version of them. So that'll be like all the emotional stuff will be left behind here. And so I think that's how it's going to go. I don't know. There's not a roadmap for this. It's never been done before. Never before has an entire planet ascended together. Ascension is typically an individual journey. And so this is happening, and what they're also encouraging us to do is to just detach as much as we can from the 3D. So detach from the story, stop tuning into the news, stop buying into it, stop paying into it, if you get my drift.
Well, there's obviously like this villainous story going on that these people are trying to do this, whether it's true or not. It's like, that's just the distraction, that's the illusion. And not saying that it might not be going on, you know, But it's just like we have to be in peace. We're creating this reality, and so when we settle in to our Godhead and we're in our special place, when we're not being the mouse on the wheel, the hamster on the wheel, we can then create from a position of our Godhead in our spirit and manifest the right way forward. So kind of that's what this whole gate is about. And they talk about 40 days of repentance, which is the same thing as the Pentecost, right? Remember, these things are reoccurring, or the same time as Jonah, right? So this is, the calendar keeps circling, and the same line synchronicities keep aligning. At the same time, we go through these and we learn a little more every time, and this is the time to cross over.
Yeah, now because this is a strange situation and we've never done this before, that also means that during this time you'll go through like a living life review, which is very different than what is typically done. Usually that happens after an incarnation. So that's happening in the middle of it. So I'm encouraging everybody, if you have not done this work up to date, if you happen to catch this before the eclipse tomorrow morning, please spend tonight forgiving yourself. Forgive yourself. Forgive all of it. Just let it go. You can do it. And it'll help release you from this reality. This is not what we all signed up for. We are ready to go. We're ready for something better. And in order to be at the vibration of that, we need to forgive ourselves, to let go of this. And so you are loved. There is nothing but love for you. You have never been forgotten. You cannot be separate from God. It is in your DNA. And this is an amazing time for all of us to truly feel our connection to Source and to each other and to build something beautiful. And this is the beginning of the Golden Age. And I woke up a couple of weeks ago, just before the equinox, maybe a week before that, in the middle of the night, and I saw giant gates in front of me that opened. And behind the gates was a golden city. And they said, the gates of El Dorado are now open to you. And a number of people are receiving these messages that this is happening, that this is the beginning of the Golden Age. And so this is it for us. And this has been a long story about how we came to be a part of this. And the one takeaway that I hope everyone remembers is that there are no chosen ones, just brave souls who agreed to go first.
And everybody's choosing themselves by doing this work, yeah. So everybody can create whatever they want to create, or whatever's in their dream world to attach to their reality.
Anybody else?
Surrender. That's been the biggest piece for me. Detach, let go, allow, step back. And that's been my go-to, really. And so that I'm just in the center of my divine heart. And, drop out of the thinking and just allow the feeling and know that you're loved and that your own divine essence is all that's required, the purity of heart.
Yep, and it's really, so we get caught in the 3D, right? So it feels so real, right? But the real us is our spirit, is our soul. So we're up on the ship in the 5D or higher, and that's really who we are. And that this experience is just a reflection of our sometimes our lowest vantage point, our lowest views. So always remember that none of this is real. Like, even though it is real to us, this is where the world we live in. It doesn't have to be, because we're really like literally existing in a cosmos way above in the 5D. So if you want to have the 5D where you're in the creator mode, then you have to leave the 3D and not, get caught up in it. And you see these things in the news. There's war. This is all in the 3D. We're the Godhead. So you can create the change just by the purity of your thought and clearing that.
Anna, anything to add in closing?
I can't think of anything.
Okay, that's okay. It was funny that you mentioned that none of this is real, which is rule number 1 in the 7 rules of engagement for winning the game of life. And I encourage everybody to keep the pocket guide with them, especially the warrior of the light, the warrior class, the God's army. They've agreed to stay behind for the next 2 waves with humanity to help them. And so it's going to be intense energetically and emotionally. So remember the rules. Number 1, none of this is real. Number 2, there is no separation. Number 3, you are not a victim. Number 4, the universe is just saying yes to everything. Number 5, everything is okay. Number 6, I have no right to make demands of others, and what everyone else is doing is none of my business. And number 7, all you need is love, and love is all you need. And so from the members of the Seven Seal Temple, thank you so much for joining us on this journey. We wish you all a blessed eclipse, and let's do this. Let's see what we can create next. We love you all.